All right, it's another beautiful day, and it's a wonderful time to be and to grace your screen today. You're welcome to another episode of The Exclusive. I am Korede Akitunde. My exclusive guest today is a former permanent secretary in the Federal Ministry of Education in Nigeria. And I'm talking about Sir Dr. Macjohn Nwaobiala. Daddy, thank you for coming on this program.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you were a permanent secretary in the Federal Ministry of Education. Let me just start with that before we even go into the program. Some people will always ask, why is a position called permanent when it is not even permanent? Is it a permanent position?
Actually, it's not permanent.
Okay.
Because it's a tenured position.
Oh, okay.
The issue of permanency, is the title given to it.
Okay.
And it also relates to the kind of job your job schedule in the ministry.
Okay.
As a permanent secretary, you are the chief admin officer in the ministry.
Okay.
You are the chief accounting officer.
Oh.
Even though there's a minister.
Okay.
But the way it's structured, you are the chief admin officer.
Okay.
You are the chief accounting officer.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. I think that's just one of those things viewers should get set to learn more about some of these things from a very articulated administrator that we have on today's episode of The Exclusive. So, sir, maybe can we now meet you? Let's know about you. We all know this is Macjohn, and but if we may know your full name, your place of birth, the year you were born, and then we'll talk more about your school and family.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
My full names are Macjohn Nwaobiala.
Okay.
Nwaobiala.
Okay, sir.
I'm from Abia State.
Oh, all right.
Umuahia North local government. And I was born on the 14th of February 1956. That's you know, 14th of February has a significance in terms of celebration.
Yes.
People celebrate it as Lovers' Day.
Wow.
Across the world. My childhood, I come from the Nwaobiala family in my hometown in Umuahia. It's a very large family. But my immediate family, that's when I say immediate family, father, mother. My mom had 10 children. 9 boys and a girl. I am the 4th boy in the family. And I had very interesting childhood, growing up in that kind of setup. Yes. And I wouldn't say in any way that I came from a privileged family. In fact, I will just say that I came from an underprivileged family. Because with 10 children, my father was a lowly paid worker in the Nigerian railways. But my father believed in education. So he struggled with my mom to ensure that all of us were educated. As we were growing up, picture the scenario. 9 boys. The age difference between us wouldn't be much. So you can picture the ruffle that is always in the family. We were always, sometimes you will see very serious fights. And one of the things that I admire my dad about is he was a very strict disciplinarian. I mean, he was very strict. And I think the kind of upbringing that we had, the socialization that we had in the family, contributed so much to where we eventually found ourselves in adult life. So, very humble background, but my father believed in education. And some of us also keyed into his vision. And that is how we went to school. I started my primary school in northern Nigeria because my father, as a railway worker, lived in different parts of the north. I still recall that in Zaria, I started my primary school in St. George's Primary School. But coincidentally, it happened that the Civil War came in. And then we all had to go back to the east. And then I continued with my primary education. After my primary education, I attended a mission school for secondary school. A mission school, that's Assemblies of God Church School, and the name of that school is Evangel High School in Umuahia. That was where I had my secondary education. I left secondary school in 1974, and in 1975, I gained admission to the University of Ife. Because I am a student of society. When I went to the University of Ife, I read my first degree was in sociology and the social sciences. And it might interest you to know that because of family conditions, it was not even my father that catered for my university education. It's a first cousin who saw my school search result and said, oh, look, you must go to the university. That time there was no JAMB. So you can sit for UNN, you can sit for Ife, you can sit for Ibadan. You can sit for 3 or 4 universities and different courses. And then you pick the one you want. So one passed 1 or 2 other universities. But my cousin said, go to Ife. I'm told it is a very beautiful school and that the level of education there is very good. So as a very young person, I now went to Ife. And that was where I spent my 4 years. And those 4 years might also be regarded as some of the best years of my life. After the University of Ife, I started working. And you know, it's not what you have now. In those days, the Civil Service Commission will come to interview final year students for employment. And one significant thing that I must mention here is that a lot of our classmates want to go to immigration, want to go to foreign affairs, I want to be an admin officer. But I made inquiries and I asked the officers from the commission, I said, which is that ministry that caters for vulnerable groups? Which is that ministry that takes care of women, children, disabled, and all that? And they told me that it is the Ministry of Social Development. And as at that time, there was just one Federal Ministry of Social Development. That was where I picked. So my first entry into the civil service, I entered into the cadre of Social Development Officer. And then I started working. I worked in Lagos for quite a while. And before we now moved to Abuja. After working for a while, I felt I was becoming rusty educationally. So I went to Unilag to do my master's in management. And then from Unilag...
business management?
human
human
resource management.
Okay.
Yes. Then from there, we came to Abuja.
Okay.
And one of my friends teased me one day and said, with all the papers, all the proposals, all the speeches you've written, you are even supposed to have gained your PhD. Say, why don't you go and read for your PhD? Secondly, because my father believed in education, he kept pressurizing me. He said, what stops you from reading your PhD? So with that kind of motivation and guidance, I registered with the Bayero University to read a PhD. It was not easy, but I thank God for that experience. Eventually, I graduated with a PhD in 2005, and my PhD was in educational psychology. That was what I did. But the good thing was that I was still working and doing the PhD. So it took some extra years to complete. So that's my history in terms of my background and you know, my family upbringing. It was not easy. I grew up in the community. And when I say I grew up in the community, I am a community person. You know, we used to go to the farm, we used to go to the stream, you know, all those things that young men do in the community, including the rascality that follows it. We were all, you know, those are things that helped us, you know, make the necessary adjustments. Yes.
So it's very interesting, and looking at a family that has 9 boys, not in a duplex anyway.
No, no, not at all.
So I was living in that kind of condition. How easy was it?
It was not easy at all. It was not.
The lady, was it the youngest?
No. The lady is the 8th.
Okay.
The 8th. Growing up was not easy. It was not, you know, there were, if I want to be very fair to myself, there were, we had to manage so many things. There were periods of deprivation. And it was not easy. You will not really understand.
Yes, I'm just reasoning.
Yes,
how many cups of rice will be
exactly
enough for that family?
But when we go down memory lane, I will also tell you that even attending school, primary school, you know, you can picture a situation where, because of the situation, your school uniform, the school uniform you are wearing, you must have washed it and washed it. And then when you look at the neck, the neck has peeled. Sometimes your shorts will have holes in the buttocks. But that did not stop us. And then because of the way we were brought up, we had to persevere. We had to go on. And my father, I wouldn't call him a role model. He was, my father was a very strong man.
Okay.
My father, I don't look like my father. My father was tall, huge, and black. And he lived for a very long time. He lived up to 93 years.
Wow.
So he really ensured that in spite of all the wants, that little we had, we shared.
Yeah.
For instance, it's not now that when you want to serve food, you put food on the table, your children sit around and they scoop whatever they want. If you want to eat, they will put a bowl of eba in front of you, put soup. Then the first group, that's the most senior, like 4 or 5 of us, will eat together.
Okay.
Then the younger ones will eat separately. And then when you are eating, you will not eat meat in the soup until after you have finished eating. Then all the meat and stockfish and all that will now be shared. Maybe the youngest, maybe I'm the youngest on that table. I will share it. And then the most senior will pick. The other person will pick. I will be the last to pick. So but one thing about it that I must tell you is that up till now, there is that bonding. There is that closeness.
Yeah.
And my father also ensured that he was always talking to us about relationship, about family. And that is the way it has been. If you come to our family, you will see that closeness, that bonding. Christmas period, Easter period, we all arrange to go home. We want to see ourselves. We want to see our children. We want to see our grandchildren. So those are things that, you know, influenced our perception of how family should be. And apart from the fact that I told you that sometimes we had altercations and we fought, but you dare not come to look for our trouble. You understand?
As a family.
Yes, you dare not come to look for our trouble. Otherwise, so it was good.
Yeah, because I'm just even picturing it that somebody that will come and look for a trouble where you have 9 boys.
Exactly.
Yeah, you will think twice.
And look, one funny thing, during the Christmas period, you know, parents used to sew uniform for their children.
Yeah.
So you can see a lineup of boys like that wearing the same. And one funny thing about it, one other thing that I must say is that if you see my elder brother, if you see him walking on the street, since you have seen me, something must strike you that either this man looks like this person or it is his brother. The resemblance amongst us was very close. And what my father used to make joke about it, if you say, all your children look like each other, the only word he will tell you, he will just say, it is hemoglobin. Hemoglobin, you know. So it was, growing up was quite demanding, but it was also a pleasure.
Now, let's see, how did that actually nurture? Was your father a committed Christian?
Yes.
Was there?
My father was a very, very committed Christian.
Okay.
Yes, and he ensured that we were also brought up in the Christian way.
Okay.
In the community, apart from my father being a Christian, because of the Christian qualities my father had, my father was highly respected. Highly respected. And my father there were some things he would tell us not to do. For instance, he would tell you that even when we became very matured, he will advise us, don't even bother to look at chieftaincy titles. Don't just focus on what you want to achieve. Don't look for people to extol you,
to
and
praise
all
you.
that. Yeah, praise you. You know, I have a few chieftaincy titles, but I know how I got those chieftaincy. Those chieftaincy titles were chieftaincy titles given to me by communities that appreciated what I have done. Not you go to buy
the title.
Exactly. So my father was a very devout Christian, and he was highly respected in the community.
What will be your advice to young ones? Because we'll get to that level whereby we compare your days to now. But What do you normally advise the young ones in terms of looking into the future?
What I advise the young ones is be yourself.
Okay.
Be your own man. Work hard. Be focused. Be committed. And have a very clear vision of what you want to do and what you want to be in the future. And you gradually work towards it. And if you have those beliefs, I also have this strong belief that God will guide your footsteps to get to a destination that you have identified for yourself. Hard work, commitment, focus, and keeping your hands clean and upright. These are virtues that I will advise young men to have. And then, of course, perseverance. You have to persevere because your expectations at a stage will not be what you will be seeing. So you have to go on, go on, go on, and until you hit it.
Thank you very much. Viewers will just take this short break, and we'll be right back talking with Sir Macjohn. All right, it's been nice time talking with the former permanent secretary in the Federal Ministry of Education in Nigeria, Sir Macjohn Nwaobiala. Thank you for your inspiring and interesting background you've given to us. Now, I want to see how a community boy then going to school, to university, at what point did you meet your wife?
I graduated from the University of Ife in 1979.
Okay.
I did a 4-year course, 75 to 79.
And then there was no ASU strike.
No. It's straight there. Even though we experienced some strikes, there was one popular strike that happened when we were at Ife.
Okay.
And that strike, we titled it Ali Must Go. That time, Ahmadu Ali was the commissioner. There were no ministers then.
Okay.
Ahmadu Ali was the commissioner of education.
Oh.
And the students were protesting that Ali should be removed. So the Ali must go. For those in my group, they will remember it. Yes. Not much strike then.
Okay.
You know, you can be sure that you finish your program within the right time. So when I graduated, I did my NYSC in Niger State.
Okay.
And that time, it was a different ball game. Now, parents struggle to influence where their children are posted. That time, there was nothing like that. You graduate, you go to the student affairs office, you are giving your transport allowance, and you are giving your posting letter. So I was posted to Niger State. And, you know, from the east, I went to Niger State, and I enjoyed my service here in Niger State. Immediately we finished service, our names came out, our names were published in the papers for recruitment. I think it was in Concord newspaper that time. They published our names, and then I went to the Ministry of Social Development. Our office then was at number 5 Kofa Bayomi Road in Victoria Land. I did my documentation and I started working. That was in 1980. Okay. Now, towards the end of 1980, that was the first time I saw my wife. And I wouldn't say it was love at first sight. Okay. I saw her through one of our very close friends who is her cousin. And we greeted and all that. I bet my instincts kept telling me that, you know, try to establish a relationship with this girl. And I made some underground inquiries
Okay.
to find out a few things about her.
Jeez.
And then I visited her, and she was living with her immediate junior sister. I used to go there to see them. But one of the things that I noticed is that, or one of the things that I can say is that each time I tell her to come to visit me, she will look for
Excuse.
an excuse. That was how it went on for a long time, until the first time she came to visit me in my place in Lagos was when my mom and my only sister came for long vacation.
Okay.
So when she came, she came to see them. And then that was it for a very long time. But eventually, we started developing that relationship. And we courted for quite some time. I saw my wife first in 1980. And we got married in 1987.
Wow.
So if you want to look at it, you say it was a very long period of courtship.
Yeah.
But it also gave us the opportunity of stabilizing. My wife also went to school, within that period.
Okay.
Because by the time I met her, she just had school start. She had just taken school start.
Okay.
Then she went to school and all that, and then came back. And we then got married in December 1987.
Wow.
And, we, as young men, we had our own, good times. But I think when you see the person that is your wife, with God's guidance, you will notice. And let me also say this. The first time that my wife visited my home in the village, and that after a few years, and my father saw her, I introduced her to my father as a friend. We are all living in Lagos and all that. And, my father with 9 boys, his antenna went up.
Very sharp.
So when my wife left and I came back, my father called me and said, "That girl, who is she? What is your relationship with her?" And I explained to him, I said, well, she's my friend. We are all in Lagos. Honestly, my father told me point blank. He said, if you are not going to marry that girl, leave her alone. Don't even befriend her. And that in stock. And eventually, we got married. And I will tell you that marrying my wife, Mrs. Comfort Nwaobiala, is the best thing that happened to me. Because in terms of motivation, in terms of support, in terms of encouragement, she has been wonderful. She's a pillar. And she's the first daughter in the family. So all her junior ones passed through
her.
Through us, yes. You understand? If I go to my in-laws' place, I'm carried like a king because I helped develop all their siblings. And we are still doing it now. You understand? I'm retired.
Yeah.
And the enjoyment and the inner peace that I have in retirement is as a result of the way I relate, to my wife, with my wife. And these are some of the things that we want to tell the younger ones. You are from 2 different backgrounds.
Yeah.
You understand? But you must learn to adjust. You must learn to accommodate each other. And you know, initially, you might, when you get married, when you take what you might call love on a scale, it might not be total.
Yeah.
But with time, it grows. In fact, at a time, some people will even tell you that you and your wife are looking alike. As if it's the same parents. So it has been a wonderful opportunity. And let me also tell you, as a social worker, I told my wife from the beginning, even when we were cutting, I said, I come from a family of 10 boys. I mean, of 10 children.
Yeah.
You have 8 or 9 siblings as well. So your family is large, my family is large. And having grown up in that kind of setting, particularly for me, because you must learn from your environment.
Yeah.
You must learn from where your experiences.
Yes.
I told her, I said, I am a social worker. I would want to have only 2 children. If God gives us 2 boys, fine. 2 girls, fine. A boy and a girl, perfect. Children come from God. And I advise people, don't overstretch yourself, whether you are having a boy or a girl. It doesn't matter. What of those that don't have at all?
At all. Yeah.
So we have 2 children, a boy and a girl. My daughter is married. In fact, my daughter was wedded by our former primate. And then my son has just finished his NYSC. So I have 2 children. But the truth is, because of the way God has blessed me, a lot of other children
that you've raised,
yes, have benefited from us. That is it. That is the truth. We still take care of a lot of children, orphans, and all that. Even though keeping your family size low has advantages and disadvantages. You understand?
Yes.
But I will always advocate for a small, neat family. When I chair weddings, I advise the young couples, don't let society pressurize you. Your mother-in-law, your father, you know, have so number of children. And don't let them also pressurize you about the sex of male or female. After all, they are not the ones that will, it's you and your wife. And let one of the things that has helped me very well in my marriage is the high level of communication between me and my wife. We plan whatever we do. We discuss it. Whatever we want to do, we work towards it. And God has always guided us.
So, because I actually wanted to ask that question, but I think you've taken care of it. Looking at today, in today Nigeria, is it good to have that kind of large family, having up to 10 numbers? But I think that has been taken care of.
And you know, Nigeria's population, we are estimated to be 200 million.
Yes.
Now. So the pool, the stress in all services, school, health, security is there. If you take a close look at countries that their standard of living and their GDP is very high, countries like Sweden, Finland, Norway, and others, their family size is very low. In fact, they encourage couples to have children. And some of those countries, they don't even have armies. Everything is well organized and well coordinated. So I normally advise couples, keep your family size reasonable. And one of the things that fuels, for those of us that were in government, one of the things that fuel corruption and demand is, and trying to do things that are not proper is because of the large size and the demand. You understand? If you have a large, a
moderate size,
yes, with your salary, the salary of your wife, you can give your children, and those that God has asked you to help, you can give them a decent support and assistance. That is the truth. But when you have a lot of children, and then also look at the health of the woman continuously, like my mom had 10 children. When I look at her, I just say, this woman tried. You know?
Kudos.
Yes.
Now let's look at government work.
Yes.
Just like you were mentioning, a lot of people do believe that those in government work, they do have more tendency to be corrupt.
Yes.
How possible it is for a Christian to not to soil his hands or his or her hands into what is not necessary in government settings?
Look, I must be very honest with you. It's very difficult. It is very difficult. But there are a lot of things that influence your personality. Your socialization, the way you are brought up, your family discipline, and also very importantly, your worldview, the way you see things.
Yes.
Do you place so much emphasis on material things? You understand? Do you feel that you must live a luxurious life? And how do you see, the world? Do you actually realize that everything is temporary? Like you are here today. Tomorrow it will be another GM that will be there. So these are things that influence your behavior. But like I said, it is not easy because you are working in a setting. You have your ministers, you are the permanent secretary. In education, we had 2 ministers.
Yeah.
We've always had 2 ministers. Then you are the PAMSEC. When I was there, I had 14 directors. Then education has a lot of parastatals and a lot of staff, unity schools, most of things that federal universities, colleges of education, they come to your table. Contractors are pressurizing you. So it is not easy. And one of the things that I must tell you is that there is a serious innermost worry. There are some things that you will be required or directed to do that is against your Christian faith, your Christian virtues, and the way your philosophies,
your belief.
Yes. So it becomes you are struggling. 2 things can happen. Either you retain your Christian beliefs and believe that it is God that gives that position. I will tell you how I became PAMSEC. It is purely God's favor. Nobody had a hand in it. Because I was not expecting that I was not expecting to be a PAMSEC. But God just placed me there. So if you believe that position and power comes from God, when God gives you, like for me, when I became a PAMSEC in 2010, and I retired in 2015. When I was made a PAMSEC, I knelt down and I thanked God and I said, I'm going to use this position to praise you, to do your works, and to help humanity. That my first this thing would be anything that is for the common good. That is what I will pursue. And it helped me when I was a PAMSEC. go and look at the records. I'm one of those PAMSECs that did not use any security when I want to go out. Civil defense does not sit in front of my car. Policeman or woman does not sit in front of my car. I just take my bag. Maybe sometimes my PA would say he wants to go with me. I will ask him, if you come to this meeting that I'm going, you are not part of the meeting. You will sit in the car with the driver. Why don't you stay in the office and do other things? You understand? So even when I travel to the village, I never, and this is the truth, I never took a policeman to guide me because I lived a very simple and humble life, and I struggled not to put my hands in those things that I will not be proud of, and those things that God will look at me and say, you shouldn't have done this. So there is a lot of struggle for Christians in the civil service. But we must continue to pray for them. And we will also insist that the fear of God should be their watchword as they do their work.
Thank you very much. Now, let's look at your first ever professional socials as a professional social service officer.
Yes.
What were your experience at that time?
You know, social development, the social development cadre is an obscure cadre in the service. Many people don't even know up till now that there is a social development cadre. So I got recruited into the service as a social development officer. There's also social welfare.
Okay.
But when you look at it, social development is more encompassing than social welfare. But the dividing line is very thin. So as a social development officer, one of the things that I will tell you, while I was in service, because of my orientation, I kept my eyes open. Very, very open. And God also favored me from a very junior cadre, grade level 8, grade level 9, grade level 10. I had favors and recognition from my very senior and superior officers. And from an early stage, I've started receiving assignments that were almost beyond my capacity. So I had to brace up and improve myself in so many ways. So, first professional social development officer to become a PAMSEC. You know, in the past, it's mainly like those in the admin cadre that become PAMSECs. Later, accountants joined, foreign affairs officers joined. But social development was, not that it was forgotten, but
was it,
yes. And that is why I have the highest respect for the head of service that was there when I was made a PAMSEC, Steve Orosonya.
Okay.
He drew he gave every director the opportunity of coming to write an exam and go through a selection process. Honestly, when I was told that we're supposed to go through this selection process, inside me, I was asking, I said, I thought you have to be a director for 3 years before you are considered to become a PAMSEC. I was director for only 1 year before I became PAMSEC.
Wow.
I was director for just 1 year, and then I became PAMSEC. We will be, and our own, the process, there's a process. The process is still on now, even though it was truncated a little. You write an exam. In our own case, we wrote 6 hours exam. 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the evening. After the exam, you go for ICT. I mean, when I say after the exam, after the written exam,
okay.
there is a cutoff mark.
Mm.
It is only those that make the cutoff mark that will go for the ICT.
Wow.
Then after the ICT, you go for the oral interview.
Mm.
So we all went through that process.
Mm.
But the funny thing, the distinguishing thing about my own was that after we had done all that for Abia State, because at the federal level there are 42 PAMSECs,
okay,
36 states, and then 6 geopolitical zones.
Okay.
The position for Abia State was becoming vacant, so they will ask all of you to come and do the exam. After we have done all those 3 processes, written exam, ICT, and oral exam, Abia State's result did not come out immediately. Until about 2 or 3 days later, one evening, got a call. Are you Mr. So? I said yes. Then they said, then I asked, who is on the line? The person didn't answer. He said, the head of service wants to see you immediately. So I stood up because I'm a process person. I went to my PAMSEC then. I was in the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs.
Okay.
And
as a director?
Yes, as a director. I was Director Child Development.
Okay.
So I went and told my PAMSEC. He said, go. It might be in connection with your PAMSEC selection. So I went to the head of service. They waited they said I should wait in his visitor's room. I sat down there. After about 5 minutes, another man, you know, it's Abia State slot another man came and saw me. Coincidentally, that man is also from my town. We are both from Umuahia.
Okay.
He said, did they call you? I said, yes. He said, what did they say? I said, they didn't say anything. He said, they called him too. So we sat down there. We were hoping that they will also invite others, all of us that did the oral interview.
Okay.
But
just the two
of us. After some time, they said the head of service said we should come. We went into the head of service office. And inside that office, it was just the head of service and Professor Afolabi that later became the head of service, just the two of them.
Okay.
And Steve Orosanya told us point blank, without wasting time, he said, both of you have the same scores. Both of you have the same scores. So we will go through an interaction this evening to enable me pick one of you. That was it. Everything, I would say, in every way, I was disadvantaged. Very young director. The other man was like 3 years a director, senior in age, and well known in the service. So they started asking questions. They wouldn't ask him or ask me. They would just put a question in the middle and we discussed. That was what happened. And what I felt was a big disadvantage to me. God just turned it around. God turned it around. All the questions that were asked, including the one that I couldn't answer, there was a way God handled it. In fact, God used that interaction to manifest himself in my life.
Wow.
2 days later, I came to the office, and that my PAMSEC called me to come to his office. I came to his office. He stood up. A very tall man, Idris Kuta, from Niger State, stood up with his agbada, and he hugged me. You know, short men like us. He said, you are now my colleague. Wow. That was what he told me. Then he went to his table and gave me the approval of the president.
Wow.
We made a federal PAMSEC.
Wow.
So Now, when people are going for the PAMSEC selection, there's a lot of pressure. Sometimes the governors will call the head of service. This is my candidate. Community leaders, traditional rulers, members of the National Assembly. But I'm telling you that when I went for that process, I did not tell anybody. Nobody knew. The only person that knew was the people that knew were two people. I have a cousin who is an archbishop in the Methodist Church. He's a junior person. He prayed for me. Then I have a lady that I helped when she had a child that had issues. When I worked, by the way, I worked in the UN for 4 years.
Okay.
So that was where I met the lady. I did something for her. So when she had that I was going for PAMSEC selection, you know exactly what she said. She said, Dr. Macjohn, for what you did for me, my daughter, and my family, if you are not made a federal PAMSEC, you know that the God that I serve is not alive. And I became a PAMSEC. And that was why I told you. I now knelt down and I said, I will use this position to honor God and to do. So, as a social development officer, being made a PAMSEC, well, naturally, you know the excitement. And in the Ministry of Women Affairs then, everybody was joyful.
Yeah.
And from that very day until I left service, I established any place I go. By the way, education was my last bit as a PAMSEC. You know, I was in Management Services Office, Head of Service.
Okay.
I was in the Cabinet Secretariat.
Okay.
In the SGF's office.
SGF.
I was in Ecological Funds, which was also SGF.
Okay.
Before I went to the Ministry of Education. It's in the Ministry of Education that I had the longest time. And with a PhD in education, I fitted in very well then. And I think I never lobbied for posting as a PAMSEC. It's God's hand that took me to education. So, social development, excitement, and I think my experience as a social development officer working all over the years, there's a link between it and education.
Education, yeah.
Not just that I have a PhD, but it also helped me to excel as a PAMSEC.
Now, looking at what you've, all this, and having been traveled around, if you look at our education sector,
yes,
I know you must have tried your best as a PAMSEC, but what were the things that you regret not doing?
There were a lot of things that we did. For instance, in the education policy, that was when we now introduced the early childhood education. Okay. You understand? That was when, it was during my stay in the ministry, that it became that JAMB was instituted. Okay. That's the CBT, the computer-based test. The computer-based. You understand? Yes. A lot of people were against it, but some of us believe that it is like postponing the evil day. So why don't we just... Luckily, I had a minister that was a core educationist, Malam Ibrahim Shakarau, that time. So there were a lot of things. When I came to education, a lot of my staff, especially at the directorate level, were stagnated. Motivation was low. So God guided me. Based on my experience in the Management Services Office, I invited them to the Ministry of Education. And we restructured the ministry. We introduced one department that was there before, but that was abolished, that they call Education Support Services. That's one of the best departments in the ministry. Then we also like the first promotion that I handled in 2013, I think not less than between 56 to 64 directors were promoted from grade level 16 to 17. Where do you put those directors? So the restructuring that we did, we now said we have 104 unity schools. That's federal government colleges. Any school that has a population of 2,800 students and above must be headed by a principal that is a grade level 17 officer. It's not the ministry taking that decision. This was an approval from the head of service. So that was how we opened up. Wow. And it's one of my best moments, seeing those officers move up. And when directors move up, deputy directors move up, assistant directors. So it was quite glorifying for me, and I'm very happy about it. There were a lot of other things. It was during my period that the process of establishing 12 new federal universities across the nation was happening. It was during my period that what we call needs assessment of the universities were done. We took an inventory of the state of decay of the universities and identified for each university, this is what, and then government gave money and we started implementing. That is one of the places where I have to commend TED Fund. TED Fund has been in the forefront. In fact, if you go to a lot of universities now, you can call them TED Fund University because you see buildings and everything. TED Fund has done well in the areas of innovation, the areas of research, capacity building, and upgrading of universities. So we did all that. And one other thing that I must mention is that it was during my period in the Ministry of Education that the longest ASU strike took place. It was a nightmare for me.
In fact, because I wanted to ask about that, what is this thing that causes ASU strike? Because it's more or less like a curriculum.
Now, it saddens most of us, both as stakeholders, both as parents, and those of us that have interest in our educational system. The strikes are too frequent, and they create gaps in our educational system. But many of the demands of ASU are legitimate. That's the truth. But for me, I feel that, this is my personal opinion, I feel that between ASU and government, there is a communication gap. If, for instance, government promises ASU in an agreement, we are going to give all the universities, say, let me use a simple example, handsets, phones. Maybe that agreement was done 2 or 3 years ago. And now you are not in a position, due to so many factors, including the dwindling price of oil and the revenue coming in, you can't meet that obligation. You should call ASU. After all, they are Nigerians. Sit down with them, explain the situation. And I say, review. Instead of giving you a Samsung, I'm going to give you a phone of lower quality. And they will understand it. But what happens in our system is that we wait. Government will wait until ASU gives notice of a warning strike, or they give ultimatum. And then we start meeting with them. You understand? And ASU is a very strong organization. And their interest is to improve what is happening in the schools. So there are ways of solving some of these things without allowing it get to an extreme stage.
To me, whose job is it to actually call them? Is it the permanent secretary? Is it the minister? Is it the president?
No, it's we have when you come to industrial action, strikes and all that, that is a major purview of the Federal Ministry of Employment.
Okay, labor.
And labor. So, but because these are, ASU is directly working with the Federal Ministry of Education, the initial discussions and negotiations and talks starts with the ministry. It is when we start it, then, but usually Ministry of Labor will come in. During my own time, it went beyond the ministry. We now moved over to Ministry of Labor. It went beyond the Ministry of Labor. We now moved over to the SGF's office. It went beyond the SGF's office. We now moved to the Vice President's office. Don't forget that National Assembly was also intervening at various points.
Yes.
And then eventually we had to go to the president. And we held a 13-hour meeting, 13 hours meeting with ASU. That was where that deadlock was broken. And we had to sign an MOU. But what I also say is that people refer to 1999 agreement, 2003 agreement, MOU, this and that. In today's world, what I would suggest is that let the federal government set up a negotiating committee, bring all those agreements, place them on the table, discuss with ASU. Can we collapse
some of these agreements
into one? The ones that are possible, we do it. The ones that are not possible, instead of referring to between 1999 and now, how many years?
Yeah.
And then another thing that I would also suggest is that universities have councils.
Governing councils.
Governing councils.
Yes.
Some of the localized issues can be handled
by the governing council
at that level. In other words, you can devolve some of the issues to be handled. For instance, the issue of earned allowances and things like that can be resolved at that level. But another thing that I will also tell you is that sometimes when these things are happening, some people with what you might call institutional memory, people that have I'm not talking of myself, but people that have gone through that process, maybe people that sat with ASU when these agreements were made. Some of us that are implementing them might not know the thinking behind those things. Some of those people can come in as advisors to support the government side in some of these talks. But we Nigerians will be very happy to see that the strikes are reduced. There are vexed issues, but you know how to handle them.
Okay, viewers, it's been interesting, and I know there are a lot of questions on the mind, but due to our time, but we'll take this short break, and we enter into the last lap of this interview. Please don't go away.
Acts 17, verses 10 to 12. The Bereans, they will listen to Apostle Paul preaching the gospel. They will accept it. But after that, they will go back home and search the scriptures to find whether what Apostle Paul was saying is true or not. So be like the Berean Christian. As you are watching these programs, we want three things to be open in your front. One, your heart must be open to God. Two, let your Bible be open and you follow us as we read. And three, you must open your notes to jot down what we are doing. Eschatos means last, and logy means study. So the study of last day's event is eschatology. You are welcome to Eschatology Simpliciter.
Thank you for being there. It's been exclusive interview with Dr. Sir Macjohn. And honestly, now, COVID-19 came in and seems a lot of people are now running around. Schools are locked down and looking at a fragile sector of education. Now, let me start from what has been the debate: e-learning. E-learning. I don't know what's your take on that. Do you think Nigeria can actually go into e-learning? Is e-learning something that the children at the level of education is primary, secondary, and tertiary?
Yes.
Tertiary may be talking about e-learning. What about the primary?
They say that necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
The COVID-19 has brought a lot of things to the fore, things that we never imagined. But even though we're looking at the negative parts, that we must also be optimistic and look at the advantages that it brings, particularly in these sectors like education, health, and all that. If you ask me, it has one thing that it has brought out clearly is the importance of virtual learning. But when you look at virtual learning, you must not look at it just the way it is. You must also look at other implications in terms of what is doable, what is practical, at what level, like you are saying, tertiary, secondary, primary. A lot of virtual learning during this, even up till now, is going on, even at primary school level and at secondary school level. But when you also look at the challenges, we are still developing as a country. So there are a lot of challenges, technological challenges and all infrastructure and all that. Some people will not want to readily go for it. It's like when we were talking of CBT. Some people will say, how can a child in one remote village in Abia State go and write that the child has not seen a computer before, and you are telling the child to go and write? That is a big disadvantage. But when it became a policy, we had to provide the facilities and make the adjustments. And today it has come to stay. My argument then was that globally, using technology to do some of these things has caught fire. So if you are saying, let us wait for the next 5 years or 10 years, and the world is moving forward and we are tagging along, it doesn't make sense. So we insisted. The National Council on Education in Abuja said CBT has come to stay, and it has come to stay. It is the same thing with virtual learning. It might not, the environment might not be the best for it now, but we should begin to give it serious thought, serious trial, and in our educational policies, we should incorporate virtual learning. It's very important. Challenges are there, networks, the cost of data, electricity, and all that. But it is something that is important. Another thing that we must also be looking at is in terms of building the capacity of our teachers.
Yes.
Because our teachers presently, many of them, this took many of them by unawares.
Yeah.
So it's like they're struggling. But if, as we develop our teachers, as we build their capacity and their professional development, we incorporate the virtual learning in strengthening their capacity. Eventually it will catch fire. Yeah. You understand? So it is something that is good. It is something that is doable if it is planned properly. But virtual learning does not replace
the real physical.
Exactly. It doesn't. It's just an add-on. You understand? That we shouldn't miss that opportunity. It strengthens certain areas. But there's nothing like our children. If you ask some of the children, they will say, I want to go to school. I want to see my friend. You know, things like that. And there are certain things that happen in the classroom that would never happen when you are learning virtually. Yes.
Yeah. In fact, so someone has raised the fact that there are subjects that may not be really thoughtful virtually, say creative arts, and some physical education. So some of these things are not what can be done
and you
virtually.
You have to
practical sections.
Yes, and you have to also develop the template for teaching those subjects if you want them to go virtual. A lot of technical subjects might not immediately fall into, might not dovetail when you want to teach them virtually. And it is one of the things that I wanted to say, that during my when I was in the ministry, one of the changes that we've had in the education sector is that there are a lot for WAEC and NECO and NAPTEP exams. There's been a lot of changes in the curriculum. A lot of trade and technical subjects have been introduced right now. You understand? For instance, we were doing some work and I saw somewhere that students scored low in painting. So I said, is it painting or fine art? You understand? But painting is on its own now. Yeah. And then I also think that the present government should lay a lot of emphasis on vocational and skills acquisition. Vocational education should receive priority. Because if you look at it now, like what you are wearing now, it might have been done by a graduate that read sociology in the university. Yeah. When he or she comes out, after looking for work for so many years, that person now decides, let me go and learn either fashion or tailoring or whatever you call it. And you have a lot of people in different areas, that are totally different from what they studied in the university. In other words, the university gives you the foundation, the basic. Yeah. And then, but when people acquire skills and vocations, and we will ensure that these skills are certified, it helps the country in so many ways to develop. We produce the technical manpower that we need, the middle level manpower that we need. Why is it that countries like Ghana, Niger, Benin, when they come here, if they handle things for you, like you are doing a building, they excel in those things. Yeah. These are some of the things that we should begin to teach our people. vocational and skills acquisition is very, very, very important.
Now, let me just take you on this before we just end this issue of education sector and the government. In those days, like you mentioned in your background, you went to a missionary school.
Yes.
Are you of the
secondary school?
Are you of the opinion that the government should return those missionary schools? And was it part of what you have thought of when you were a permanent secretary?
You know, education is on the concurrent list.
Okay.
The federal government business in terms of secondary school is mainly the federal government colleges.
Okay.
And then giving the policy direction and guiding the states. Now, I am aware that some states, like Anambra State, before Peter Obi left, he handed over all the former missionary schools back to the missions, back to their owners to manage. It will be something that will be ideal, because in these mission schools, I know the kind of discipline, I know the kind of organization that happens there. However, my worry is in terms of, can the missions sustain the schools in terms of funding? Can the missions do the missions have the capacity to manage the schools to give that excellence? In that direction, if we are advocating, and I think it is good, I will suggest that in handing over, you know, these schools to the missions to run, government should also think of giving those missions some kind of subvention or support.
Yeah. You
understand? Subvention or support to be able to
run.
Yes. Because the alternative will be for the missions to charge exorbitant fees, which might eventually turn out to low learners enrollment. But if an arrangement can be worked out where government, even in the past, when we joined the service, NGOs, non-governmental organizations that are doing good job, when we are budgeting, we normally have a budget line for subvention and support to NGOs, because they complement
the
role of government. It's the same thing that missions will also play. And we are also thinking of changing the moral psyche of Nigerians, particularly from childhood.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
And that is a major role that the missions can play. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Before we draw the curtain, we've gone beyond our time. Let me quickly ask this back and forth on the issue of WAEC from the federal government. Initially, we learned that those who are about to do their WAEC and so will be allowed to go back to school in the face of the COVID-19.
Yes.
But later, it was withdrawn. What do you think should be the thing to be done?
In one of the interviews that I granted, I felt that the government position is what we should do. But you know, you also measure the mood of the nation, and you measure the reaction of different groups. You can't ignore that in governance.
Yeah.
There has been a lot of agitations that Nigeria should not pull out of WAEC and NECO. Now, there was a discussion on television, and the argument of some people is that, okay, for instance, in federal government colleges, most of the schools are boarding. You bring in children from somewhere, put them together for 1 month to enable them do revision and write the exams. The dangers, because of the way COVID-19 spreads, is very high.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are looking at it from that angle. But from the discussion, some people were saying, remove the issue of revision.
Let them revise at home.
Yes. And then parents can make arrangements for their children to go and write the exams from somewhere, not within the school environment. Yes. Now, what I felt is that because of Nigeria's position in terms of numbers, in terms of our influence, there are 5 countries that own WAEC. What I felt was that there should be dialogue
within the country.
Yes. Is it possible to do it in November? So that we also watch the trends. Perhaps God can help us. The curve will go down. If the students do that exam in November, it will be, it's striking a balance. Reach an understanding with other countries. After all, the thing is also serious in countries like Ghana and other, some of these other 5 countries. So you look at the best option. I think if we tarry a while and shift the dates of the exam to say November or end of October, our students should be able to
write.
Yes, to write the exams. And then very serious consultations
should not be done.
Should also be done amongst, yes. And then all the necessary protocols
should be laid out.
Should be laid out. And the schools should be adequate. We should ensure that those protocols are adhered to by the schools. And if it is possible for the federal government, certain things can be done on, that is, government can help schools. For instance, if we know the number of students that will write the exam, between the federal government and the state government, things like face masks can be provided for all those children. Somebody was jokingly saying on the television this morning that if you ask the tailors in Aba, within 2 days they can produce millions of face masks. You understand?
Yes.
And a few other things. It is a question of give and take. Yeah. Parents are anxious. My child is in SS3. You understand? And I can't imagine that child losing 1 year. And don't also forget that there are a lot of insinuations. So government should listen to the feelers of the people and also interact very seriously with other countries, come to an understanding, and pick a date that is not WAEC imposing a date on Nigeria.
Yeah.
Because we are, in terms of numbers, if you look at Nigeria's number.
Yes.
So these are some of the things that I think.
But the school generally, so do you think the schools should continue to shut down?
For now,
yeah.
For now, I think the schools should not
remain.
they should not open.
Okay. Now, let's come back to church. You are the chairman of Abuja Diocese of Education Task Force, and which was constituted by Primate Ndokuba.
Yes.
And what idea can you share with owners of schools and government in planning for reopening? Or let me even start from what was the purpose of that committee?
Okay. You see, the primate's vision is to strengthen education and use it as a veritable tool for missionary work.
Okay.
Now, what he has requested the task force, it's a 12-man task force.
Okay.
We have very clearly delineated terms of reference, 8 terms of reference.
Okay.
One is that he wants us to give him a picture of the state of our schools.
Okay.
All the schools in the diocese. Nursery, primary, even the creche, secondary. And we are working on that.
Okay.
Then he also wants us to take a look at a school like AGGS. Is it possible for AGGS to be nurtured, to be conducting advanced level studies? You know, in the past we used to have A level and all that.
Yes.
And then to also facilitate, is it possible for learners there, instead of going through JAMB, they go through other examination bodies to gain admission. Is it possible for us to encourage the school to prepare students there for proficiency and qualifying exams like SAT, TOEFL, and all that? That's another aspect. The other thing he wanted us to do is look at an old school, Anglican school, All Saints School in Wuse, that has been there for 32 years. And yet, it seems to have made not much progress. He wants us to look at what can be done to totally restructure and reposition that school. Okay? And then he also wants us to look at the education policy of the diocese.
Okay.
Does it require a review? Are there things like what we are discussing now, the issue of virtual learning? So some of those are the things we are looking at. Then some of the deaneries that don't have schools, what are their potentials for establishing those schools? Okay. Those are some of the things that we're looking at.
You were also a chairman for the AIA Implementation Committee.
Yes.
Will you say that the school, you know, it has a very wide vision. So will you say the school is doing well at its present starting stage?
Yes. A lot of thought, a lot of funding went into the Anglican International Academy. And as the chairman of the implementation committee, we were not involved in the construction of physical structures and all that. The assignment given to us was the physical structures are there. Ensure that the school starts. So we did all that. And we were very happy that last year we started modestly. We had about 23 students, the fresh intakes. But when you go to that place and you see the facilities there, you will not even believe that that place is a secondary school. That place, a lot of polytechnics and universities don't have the kind of structures. And look at the mass, the area. It has more than enough space for improvement. And for me, looking into the future, I can see that place becoming even a university. Yes,
yeah.
yes. The only challenge we have now, and we're appealing to FCDA or Ministry of Federal Capital, there are the access road to that place. I think it's in the budget.
Okay.
I think if they build the access road, that place will be a wonderful opportunity for a lot of students from different parts of the country. Because just like the name stands, Anglican International Academy.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, in your capacity, what do you think the church can still do to better education? Some people are of the opinion that we contribute offering in church to build schools, and then an average member cannot put his child in the school. What do you think the church needs to start thinking about?
It is, schools, I wouldn't, let me use the word, you don't run a school at a loss where you give and give and give. But it is also the fees that the students pay. Initially, when you start a school, you will put in a lot of money. But at a stage, the school is supposed to be stabilized and be self-sustaining. If you do a comparative analysis of almost all the mission schools around Abuja, not just Anglican schools, you see that there are fees that people feel are astronomical, and that members are contributed to building of these schools. Some people feel bad that they cannot send their children to those schools. That is what it is. Sometimes you can't change it. But one of the things that we are also recommending is that, like teachers in those schools, if their biological children are schooling there, we should be able to give them, it's not a waiver, like a rebate for their biological children. That is one. Then two, one of the things that my task force is recommending to the primate is that Abuja Diocese should establish a diocesan education endowment fund. I have my ideas of such fund. It will be a major project for the diocese. Well thought out, well designed, launched, and eminent Anglicans from all over Nigeria are requested to support that fund. From that fund, you provide support to some of the schools. You give funding, scholarship to our students of Anglican Communion that are brilliant, but maybe they are indigent. You understand? You do those things, and then from that fund you can also create. For instance, if an archdeaconry or a parish has a creche that they want to upgrade to a nursery school, you can take funds from there to support them. You understand? So these are some of the things that I think we should do. And continuous mobilization of our laity in terms of supporting education and seeing it as a missionary and evangelism work is very, 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 very important. There are a lot of Anglicans that have the resources to support God's work, and we should bring them together.
Thank you very much, sir. It's been a long one, and we want to appreciate you, sir,
Thank you
for
much.
finding time to be on this show. It's been the former PAMSEC of the Federal Ministry of Education, Sir Dr. Macjohn Nwaobiala. We thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
It's a pleasure. And let me also commend you for the good work that you are doing here.
Thank you, sir.
One of the things that I will say, and I think the Primate has given that assurance, for ACNN to go like into be on DSTV and all that. I know you are working towards that. A lot of us are looking, you know, to that. It will give us a lot more publicity, and it will be easy for people, for Anglicans to key in.
Thank you very much, sir. And it's been a wonderful time with our guests today. Yeah, I hope you've learned one or two things, especially on education and the kind of background that he had before becoming what he is today. And I hope you are blessed. See you same time next week on another episode of The Exclusive. Until then, remain rapturable.